Today on Sports Central, we'll be going over a college football game preview on one of the big matchups coming up in week number 8, and one of the first big matchups coming up in the first week of the Big Ten being back, and that's going to be between Michigan and Minnesota. Minnesota's going to be at home for this one. Should be a great matchup between both these teams. Obviously, both teams are ranked heading into this matchup, and both teams are pretty evenly matched as well, I would say. Both teams definitely have right around the same amount of momentum and potential as we go through the season. So it's an important game for both teams to start off their seasons right. And I think, honestly, the team who wins this game could go on to a pretty big season. So that's another reason why it's going to be a pretty important one for both these teams as we look forward into the rest of the season. Game's going to be on Saturday, October 24th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on primetime in Minneapolis. Spread currently says Minnesota by 1.5. However, our other two sources are saying Michigan. ESPN FPI's got Michigan 55%. Then the Vegas prediction actually is Minnesota or Michigan by 4, 27-23. So yeah, it's 2 against 3 here for Michigan, and it's kind of a surprise there. Obviously, Michigan is the higher ranked team, but Minnesota is at home for this matchup, so it's going to be a pretty tight matchup between both these teams. And of course, this is still being recorded pretty early on in the week, so there is a chance that the spread and the FPI will change as the week goes on. But Minnesota is currently favored in the spread by 1.5 points. Here's your stat comparison as well. These are your 2019 final stats because, of course, we haven't seen either of these teams play a single game yet this season. Michigan last year was 29 points per game, or they had 29 points per game, 23 points allowed, 223 pass yards a game, 143 rush yards, and then 256 pass yards, while 105 rush yards were allowed per game for the Wolverines. Looking at Minnesota, on the other hand, they had a better stat line in some areas. They had 32 points per game, however, they allowed 24 points per game, so they did allow 1 more point than Michigan did, but still, Minnesota does have 3 more average points per game on the other end. They had 246 pass yards a game, 124 rush yards, and as far as yards allowed go, they have allowed 252 pass yards on average and then 102 rush yards a game. So both teams are pretty similar if you look at it. I mean, as far as yards allowed, both defenses are almost the same, within give or take 5 or 6 yards. And then, yeah, as far as it goes for points per game, Minnesota is a little bit higher, but still on the other side on Michigan, they're still looking pretty good as far as last season's stats go. Here's some key points. Both teams have potential to have big seasons, I think, and I think both teams, especially Minnesota, they've got Tanner Morgan coming back at quarterback. He's definitely going to be, I'd say, a top 4 quarterback in the Big Ten this season, and he could easily be possibly a dark horse Heisman contender. Who knows? I mean, if he leads Minnesota to a big season, watch out for Tanner Morgan. I mean, we saw him last season. He led Minnesota to one of the best seasons that this program has ever had. And, I mean, with Minnesota having him back, that's going to be huge for this team. Watch out for them there. And the Michigan is a bit more questionable, I would say, than the Golden Gophers, mainly because they don't have Shea Patterson anymore. They've lost a lot of talent. And, I mean, the quarterback situation is kind of very questionable right now. It's kind of a mess, to be honest with you. And I'm much more confident in Minnesota than right now than I am with Michigan. And that's also why, if you've seen my rankings videos, I've always had Minnesota ahead of Michigan this season, mainly because of that. I'm just much more comfortable with going with Minnesota here than Michigan, because, once again, I think Michigan last season was the better team than Minnesota if you compare both of these teams. But in the end, Michigan lost a lot more talent over this past offseason than Minnesota did. Minnesota really has not lost a lot of talent from 2019 to 2020, which is a big surprise, knowing Minnesota really hasn't been much of a nationally contending program before 2019. So, yeah, that's something you got to note there. And I definitely think Minnesota, I mean, this team has got a lot of potential. They're kind of scary going into next season, or going into this season. Minnesota, watch out for them, especially in the Big Ten West. They've got potential to possibly go out and win that division, and it starts with this game here. And honestly, I mean, looking at both teams here, I've got Minnesota winning this game. I think Minnesota will go on to get a huge win here in the first week of the Big Ten action. I think your halftime score is going to be 17-13. Golden Gophers will lead at the half, and it's going to be back and forth for the majority of this one. I think this is probably going to be one of the games that's going to be a big standout game of the year so far in this 2020 season. And a big reason why is going to be your final score, 34-27. Minnesota is going to end up winning this game by a touchdown, and I think it's going to be more of a moderate to a high-scoring game here between both of these teams. Obviously, Minnesota being a team that's pretty good on offense, it wouldn't surprise me to see Minnesota put up 30 to close to 40 points in this matchup. And I think Michigan will hang around. Once again, I think that they're going to hang around for the majority of this one. I just think Minnesota being at home, and I mean, it's going to be I'm definitely putting a lot of potential on this team going into this season. I think Minnesota's got a good chance to go pretty far in the Big Ten this year, especially in that Big Ten West once again. I'd give them a pretty good shot to win that division this year and possibly represent the Big Ten West in the championship game for the conference. As long as they can get past Wisconsin. Obviously, both teams will play at some point in the season. But, I mean, it all starts with this game here. If Minnesota can win this game here, that's going to give them a really good starting point. And, I mean, same thing for Michigan. It's very important for Michigan if they're wanting to win the Big Ten East, which will be a very difficult division this year, especially with having Penn State and Ohio State in there. It's going to be important for Michigan, too. So both teams are really going to fight this one out. I just think Minnesota comes out on top in the end. But do let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup. Obviously, this is going to be a big one, probably your biggest matchup coming up in week number 8 of this 2020 season. But yeah, once again, let me know your score predictions, everything else in the comments below. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this game. But then again, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. If you enjoyed this preview, slap a like on it and subscribe. Really upset the channel. I'd really appreciate that. But yeah, once again, stay tuned. I'll see you later.